welcome to all of you who are watching the live feed on Facebook. And I'd really love to thank our amazing panel for joining today. You will see shortly what a wonderful group this is, and I very much look forward to this discussion. My name is Daniel Obst. I'm the president and CEO of AFS Intercultural Programs, and I'll be your moderator today. First of all, let me just say how thrilled we are at AFS to have formed this partnership with the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation to deliver the Youth Assembly. This is such an important thing to bring young people together, to create a platform to engage in this incredibly important discussion on how we can make progress towards the Sustainable Development Goal. Just a brief word about AFS. Our mission is to provide intercultural learning opportunities to help people develop the knowledge, skills, and attitude so that they can create a more just and peaceful world. And I have to say, I can't imagine a more important mission that we have right now. AFS operates in 60 countries around the world. We're a volunteer-driven organization with 50,000 volunteers. And our core work is really around developing active global citizens. We do this through exchange programs and other global competence development programs, globalizing schools and institutions, as well as expanding access to intercultural learning opportunities. And of course, the Youth Assembly is all about active global citizens, people, young people who want to take action in the world, in their communities to make the world a better place. There are about 20,000 Youth Assembly alumni around the world. Some of them are speakers here today. And I'm really thrilled that in August 2022, we will finally welcome people back to New York for a Youth Assembly. This week is what we call UNGA Week in New York City. That means the UN General Assembly is meeting. Of course, this is a very important event every year, but somehow it feels especially urgent this year for nations to come together and address our key challenges, especially around the COVID response as well as climate action. And so it is in that context that we'll have this discussion today. What I want to do before we turn to our first speaker, I want to do a lightning round of introductions so that you just briefly meet all of our amazing panelists. And let's start with Hava Diallo, just a very brief introduction. Where are you from? Where are you based? What's your organization? Hava.
Hey everybody, I'm Hava Diallo. I'm with the UN Department of Global Communications. I'm specifically working with civil society here in New York. I'm a New Yorker, but originally from Sierra Leone, West Africa. I have enjoyed all the time I've spent in the United Nations, working in so many different places, meeting so many awesome people and really learning a lot about people. I'm looking forward to engaging and interacting with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. Regina.
Hello, everybody. My name is Regina Honu. I'm the CEO of Shunko Academy, a coding and human-centered design academy in Accra, Ghana. I'm also an AFS board member and an AFS alum. So I went to Norway when I was 16, a life-changing experience. So I'm really excited to engage in this conversation and engage with you all and talk about all the mega trends and how young people can, make their voices heard and join the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's turn to Louise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louise Mabulo. I'm currently in the Philippines, and I'm the founder of my social venture, which is the Cacao Project, which builds sustainable and resilient livelihoods for farmers here. I'm also a UN Young Champion of the Earth and a Forbes Under 30 honoree, and of course, a Youth Assembly alumni, which I'm very proud of.
Wonderful. Welcome. Tatiana. Okay, let's go to Reba and then we'll come back to Tatiana.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Reba. I'm from Botswana. Lived in the US, currently in the UK right now, so all over. I'm a Youth Assembly alumni, was a former Youth Assembly ambassador for the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation. I am a medical doctor, currently out in practice, just completed my MSc in Global Health Policy at the London School of Economics. And right now in transition, I'm currently working for a startup organization called Thriving Health. We're trying to work as a program management assistant to build healthy communities. So we're currently working on building a hospital. So I'm so glad to engage in this with everyone to kind of get ideas and see what youth are up to right now.
Thank you, and fellow LSE alum or student. Dana from Qatar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dana Lanazi, and I am an YA alumni and the Qatar Youth Ambassador also with the YA prior to it joining with the AFS, and very excited to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful, welcome. And last but not least, Mois.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Mois Lakhani. I'm a third-year student at McMaster University studying health science. I'm the founder of a social venture by the name of Ninja Girls, which aims to empower women in developing countries by teaching them basic self-defense techniques that they can use to defend themselves. On the topic of FAF and Youth Assembly, that was actually kickstarted through the Global Impact Challenge. So we're very grateful for the funding and the mentorship that was received. I'm also an alumni for the World Innovation Summit for Education Learners Voice Program and former Youth Assembly speaker as well. So it's a pleasure to be joined here, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Mois. And he didn't say that he also has a second-degree black belt in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. So welcome all. What I want to do now before I turn to Hava for her remarks is to just briefly put into context what we heard from you when we surveyed you around kind of what are the sustainable development goals that matter most to you all. So I'll ask Nikki to go to the next slide. What is great, we received more than 500 responses from young people all over the world. All of them are clearly active global citizens who want to see action in their communities and in the world. And when we asked which sustainable development goals are most important, the four that came out on top were education, health, ending poverty and peace, followed by gender, climate action, employment, and economic growth. So that gives us a little bit of context, really what matters to young people most right now. If we go to the next slide and we look a little bit more deeply into those four top sustainable development goals. Nikki, can you go please to the next slide? Great. We asked kind of like in those four broad categories, what are the key issues that matter most? It's a lot around access to education, it's COVID preparedness, but also ensuring that there's equal access to mitigation efforts around COVID-19. Mental health is a huge issue everywhere around the world as a result of COVID-19. As well as, of course, good governance and dealing with the humanitarian crisis that we're seeing in so many places around the world. So those are some of the key issues that we'll be also looking at in terms of our upcoming Youth Assembly. And finally, we asked what other things matter. And it's really interesting here to see that it's not just about, you know, how do we give young people a platform? How do they have equal access and seats at the table? It is also around how do we get the economy, employment, education back after COVID-19, the huge inequalities that have been revealed, as well as issues around global citizenship. I think what we have realized, what many young people are also seeing, is that we're so incredibly interconnected. We are really part of a global family. And so what are the issues there and how can we advance that in the world? So that's what we heard from you in terms of what matters. This will help inform how we develop the content. But of course, what also helps inform the content development for the upcoming Youth Assembly is what the United Nations calls megatrends. And so we're so delighted to have Hava here today from the United Nations to talk to us, like what are these megatrends, how does it relate to youth, and how do we address how youth can engage in the United Nations system to help achieve the global goals. So let's stop the PowerPoint and let's turn to Hava for your remarks.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thanks so much, everybody. I mentioned I'm so excited to be here and really being in such a space and having this discussion on how a sustainable, prosperous future together is possible is such really an honor. For me, it's quite exciting. So, I mean, really for me, youth engagement within the United Nations is really imperative. It's really essential and central to everything the United Nations does, especially when it comes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or the global goals as they're popularly known as. So I'm delighted to see how youth organizations or youth serving organizations like AFS, and especially a platform like the Youth Assembly, play a leading role in sharing and promoting the UN's Agenda 2030 for sustainable development. Today's event is really a good example that demonstrates that young people are united, motivated, and actively engaged with the global agenda. And the challenges that we face today, it's really centered me listening to the responses that were received in terms of, where you want the Youth Assembly to focus in 2022. Just makes me think that young people are really on point. And as you say, Daniel, it's more than just, giving them a seat at the table, raising their voices, which is really important and necessary. But knowing that there are those other, intricate issues and challenges that need to be addressed that, directly affect the way that we live, every day, that affect the way that young people will continue to thrive and to carry on generations to come. I mean, what I have noticed, working with young people, I love every minute of it, is that, there are no inhibitions. You're not waiting for an invitation. You're taking that front seat at the table and assuming the responsibility that comes, with it. It's not all about just social media and taking pictures, but it's hard work, it's commitment, it's activism. It's really, calling people out in a really respectful way, calling out the previous generations and leaders in terms of, what has come before you and what is presented, in front of you right now, moving forward. So many people, I'm sure, were involved and participated in the UN 75th anniversary. We all celebrated that. A lot of work has gone into really, reflecting on the UN, but also looking forward in terms of, how do you see the UN? What kind of world do we want for ourselves? And, a major report that came out of the UN, as, sort of Daniel alluded to, was one that really spoke about megatrends that will shape our world over the next century. This week is Climate Week at the United Nations, but also in New York City, here in the US. And you mentioned we have the UN General Assembly, it's the 76th session. And climate change and, as one of the megatrends is something that is taken full stage and center of General Assembly discussions. So, a major megatrend would be climate change and nature degradation. I mean, we shouldn't forget that climate change also includes things like deforestation, protection of our forests, of desertification or coastal areas. A second megatrend that was identified is the rapid population changes. And what was interesting for me is that it's particularly having to do with aging. Yes, the youth population is there, youth bulge in many developing countries, but you find that there's a growing aging population as well, that many countries, especially in the West, have to, deal with. Here in the United States, you find that more and more, elderly people have concerns, whether it's, health issues, housing issues that need to be tackled. So for me, it's looking to see how to balance both that growing aging population in various countries, mostly in the North, and also that rising youth population in a country like mine, Sierra Leone. Urbanization is another mega trend that was identified, and for me, I hold a special place for this. I worked in UN Habitat in Nairobi, Kenya for 10 years. As a young professional in my early 20s, I found myself in Nairobi, and honestly, I have to say, even though I had worked in the UN for a couple of years, I really was not familiar with urbanization or familiar with the urban context or how important, local authorities were to making decisions that affect all of us in an urban context and a rural context as well. And one thing I learned there is just really how marginalized people are, in the urban context. I mean, I worked a lot in informal settlements, especially with young people and disenfranchised women. And one of the things that popped out at me there, especially with young people, is how much dynamism there was, how much innovation there was in informal settlements, in dire poverty. And one thing I always remember is a major difference was access. Dana, you talked about access to education, but access to resources. That many of the young people in informal settlements in major mega cities had all the ideas, they had all the passion, but they were operating on an uneven, on level playing field. So what do we need to do as multilateral organizations, as civil society organizations, as activists to address these inequalities? Because inequalities is another mega trend that was identified. We all talk about gender parity, but inequalities in economies, inequalities in wealth. So for me, these global processes exert a pervasive influence on the Agenda 2030. How are we going to address them? What do we need to do? What indicators do we need to address and monitor? How are we making our governments accountable and ourselves as well? It's not always all about government. So for me, achieving the global goals depends critically on the success of policy interventions, of course, to shape them. Each of these megatrends have evolved continuously over decades, and they develop their own dynamics. They influence economic, social, and environmental dimensions. The trends also give us a glimpse into the future, and the future is shaped by these global processes. I think we need to ask ourselves, is this the future we want? And for this discussion, most importantly, is this the future you want, especially as young people? Because I think that young people around the world and youth representatives of civil societies, university students, you have that power. You have that power to shake it up. You have that power, to turn things around. And I'm using that term, turn things around, because, in the global communications, the department I work in, we do a lot of campaigns. And there's a pretty cool campaign that they've just created. So many campaigns are being thrown out this week that are really, really purposeful. The Turn It Around campaign for People and Planet is one I think you definitely should find out about. It's being showcased all over during the Global Week for the SDGs. I think for us in the Department of Global Communications, as I said, government has a major role, but we as individuals also, our individuals' actions, big and small, whether we're individual people, whether we're organizations, they go a long way in achieving the SDGs and global issues. And for me, what I like about the individual actions is that, you don't have to come to the UN General Assembly to solve an issue. Right in your neighborhood, the changes that you're making in a daily day in your life, make a difference. And it makes that connection to the global also. I like to use the word global. We're living in an environment, as we said, we're all interconnected. Whether, you are in Kathmandu or you are in Connecticut in the United States. So of course, these actions alone can't, be the solution to global problems. These are only ways for us to join the conversation, to raise awareness, but most importantly, to inspire others, and for me, inspire myself to take action. And I know that young people already know this, and you know what needs to be done. You're doing it already. You're here on this platform. So I mean, you don't need me to sort of tell you this. I think innately young people, as I say, you have no inhibitions. And it's that I think I remember way back in my 20s, just being ready to take action, and to get things done. Now, in the Department of Global Communications, we have a lot of ways for young people to get involved. I manage a youth representatives program. I manage also a youth steering committee of young people working in civil society who have that passion to make a difference. And we're always advocating the power of storytelling, ensuring that all voices are heard, specifically those of young people in civil society, because I know that you have a lot to say. And I know that your voices locally, globally need to be visible. And I think the UN is really making a great effort to spotlight and engage young people to address the specific issues I mentioned before. So, I mean, definitely check out our website and, get involved in some of the work that we do. We have a really great program that's coming up where, I love working with young people of the ages of 18 and over, but also, like UNICEF, I feel it's important to hear from adolescents. So coming up, we're going to be doing a program of teens and tweens. Kind of asking them, what do you think about the COVID-19 crisis? What do you understand about racism and intolerance? What solutions and what ideas do you have? I think, the earlier you start, I think, the better it is in making those global citizens, as you mentioned, Daniel. In the Department of Global Communications, another great platform we have is a civil society conference that really has a great youth platform. The last conference took place in Salt Lake City. There were about 5,000 people, and about a third of those people there were young people. And boy, did they raise the bar up. Those young people there created a climate compact, which was equal to the outcome document of the conference. And they presented that really to member states. It was presented, I should say, by the UN to member states. And it was really a collective agreement of young people around the world, really harnessing the power they have to build a better future, certain and free of devastation and climate crisis. I mentioned this because COP26 rather, is coming up. And I think that's another platform where we need to tackle climate issues as young people.
Thank you so much, Hava. And what I would love to do with your permission is to collect all these different opportunities for people to engage, and that we can share it with the audience after this call, because I think there's so many both important and essential platforms that people have to engage in order for us to make progress.
Awesome. That'll be my pleasure.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to more discussion.
Thank you so much. And so I'll turn to Regina now and just ask her for her reaction. So we have heard from Hava kind of on the key megatrends: climate change, nature degradation, inequalities, urbanization, rapid population changes, and technological revolution. And so this, and you, Regina, are both in education and a tech entrepreneur. Also, congratulations. I think just today, Quartz Africa recognized you as a top female innovator and recognized your initiative as one of the most exciting female-led initiatives in Africa. So congratulations on that. But how do you see this from your perspective, both sitting in Ghana, but also in Africa, in terms of addressing these megatrends?
Thank you so much, Daniel. So from my perspective, and it was interesting to see, like from the survey, a lot of people were interested in education and health, obviously, because of the pandemic, but also looking at the different inequalities. So from where I sit, one of the rising trends that we see are young people looking, to advance their skills and removing the barrier of age, right? So it's interesting that we saw that a lot of people are looking for different ways of education. So the traditional way people are educated is changing, where the teacher is the body store of knowledge. Now, young people are looking for more of a dialogue, more of an engagement, more of an interaction, and education that goes beyond the classroom. So we're seeing a lot more young people questioning the status quo, probing more into information, trying to go away from the standards as they are and looking at how they can bring a different perspective. And we're seeing them not to be shy or afraid to stand out. So that's very encouraging. With that said, I mean, we still have to look at, the conversation of access and opportunity across board. So when you look across the continent, you'll see that in as much as, there are a lot of shining spots there, there's still the big conversation of inequality that we have to tackle, because COVID-19 really unearthed that. As we look back again at education, what we'll find out is that a lot more young people went out of school due to the pandemic. So then how do we reverse this trend? How do we catch up, from all the issues that came with the pandemic? And how are we ensuring that we are prepared, no matter what happens? And this is where digital comes in. So once again, once the pandemic came, and even with the question of unemployment and a lot of young people looking for opportunities, this is where the technological revolution and digital is going to play a key role. So from where I sit, in the tech space, we're seeing a lot of innovators or young people looking at how they can use digital, even from the point of content creation. So, I mean, I think during the pandemic, we had a lot of TikTok stars being born, a lot of content being created in a fun and engaging way. We had a lot of young people using these digital platforms to hold governments to account. So I know even in my country, there were movements that were started online and went from being online, offline. We're seeing employment where a lot of employers are looking at, the future of work and hiring young people with these essential digital skills. So we have to make sure that, we are bridging that gap across board, connecting the unconnected and making sure that more people have access, to be able to learn different digital skills and have access to different digital tools so that they are not left behind. Because with the tech revolution, another challenge that will be is that you have the inequality between the digital literate and the people that are digitally illiterate. So we have to make sure that we don't create those inequalities also as we're moving forward, as the future of work is changing, as we have these tech revolutions, as governments are digitalizing their platforms, their engagement with the citizenry. We really have to make sure that we don't forget that we bridge these gaps and that we give young people more of the platform. And like how I say, they don't ask for permission, they are taking charge. So we need to give them more opportunity and encourage all these different initiatives across the world. There needs to be more support. I know governments are listening because now young people hold them to account. Before you put out any information, there's a fact finder, somebody will call you out. So you have to make sure that you get all the information accurate. So we really have to take advantage of this momentum, because another word that how I use that we hear a lot now is the collective. Right? So young people want to come together and, they believe that in a collective, they can do more. So I am really excited to see that with the Youth Assembly, it is bringing together a collective of different ideas, young people sparking change and, challenging each other to think outside the box. So how can we continue these conversations that we've started? How can we make sure that we go from just conversation to action? How do we mobilize this action? How do we sustain the momentum? And how do we, keep the change that we wish to see? So I'm really excited to see like all these trends coming out of the survey. I can't wait to see what will happen with the Youth Assembly, because I really think that it's a time for young people. And with digital, as an enhancer, it will allow more young people to break barriers, to shatter ceilings, and to go to places that, they previously may have been held back, but now there are more platforms, more channels. We just need to have more governments listening, more opportunity for young people, and really sustaining all these changes and initiatives that we're seeing.
Thank you so much, Regina. And I think kind of the key points you make, the incredible importance of access and opportunity, but also around collective action. I think that's exactly, what a youth assembly is, or any kind of platform, it's like you cannot, and what AFS is all about, right? Like you cannot make progress in the world if you do it alone. You have to work with others for collective action. Let me now turn to Dana and to Reba and ask, because you were both previous Youth Assembly ambassadors or leaders in your respective countries, and have seen kind of a lot of engagement around youth issues. How have things changed with COVID-19, and what are some of the issues that you see in your countries or for the world that are more urgent now as a result of COVID-19? And Dana, can we start with you, please?
Thank you, Daniel. I think just in general, when we're speaking about things from Qatar's perspective, I'd like to start from a global perspective. I have a very shocking number I'd like to share with you guys, just to touch base on the megatrends perspective. The COVID-19 pandemic has created the largest disruption of education system in history, affecting nearly 1.6 billion learners. And this is according to a UN policy brief titled Education During COVID-19 and Beyond. I think this pattern of disruption trickled across many sectors, whether it's health, whether it's agriculture, whether it's the workplace, whether it's education. And it really brought us forward to face our own reality when we think about issues of access, issues of equity and equality. So let's talk about, for example, the first policy response that we had, whether it's with the Youth Assembly that was held during COVID-19 or the beginning of the pandemic, or the idea of trying to respond to the disruption of education. Everything went virtual, right? But did everyone have access to the means and resources, whether it's internet, whether it's technology, whether it's literacy in internet and technology, to continue riding this wave moving forward? Absolutely not. That is a huge flaw in the policy that was put forward, and it's still being adopted till today, whether it's in the workplace or in the provision of education. Something else we have seen is, through my interaction with my followers during the beginning of the pandemic, I had asked a question, what have you realized has been the biggest shock for you, biggest wake-up call for you during COVID-19 or as a result of COVID-19? A lot of them mentioned and talked about mental health. It is no secret that many of us have been affected emotionally and mentally. I think we should talk about that human aspect as well. Beyond resources, beyond business, beyond partnerships, our souls were affected. A lot of us lost close loved ones. A lot of us remain in a time of confusion. A lot of us are still recovering and moving forward. So I think beyond moving forward, we still talk about recovery and who we are today. How has this changed us? And mental health for me has played a big role in all of that. Addressing these things internally, addressing these things within our peers and colleagues and friend groups is very important. So for me, in essence, when we talk about global citizenship, when we talk about leadership, when we talk about globally building back better, I ask you, what are you as a person or an individual doing for your community? And by community, I mean your close loved ones first, before expanding into the entirety of society, the entirety of the global international system. Yes, we all have aspirations, but I think what COVID-19 has taught us is grassroots will always come first before we talk about the multilateral international systems or any form of cooperation. If we are not present or at balance, at core, then with ourselves even, right? With ourselves even, then I don't see us reflecting that to Mother Earth, to the greater good in general. That's my 2 cents, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Dana. So well said. And I think a really important statistic for us to all remember: the largest disruption of education in history. And with that, of course, huge impacts on emotional and mental health. And so those are key issues you mentioned. Reba, what about you? How do you see this? What has changed in terms of the COVID-19 crisis? How has that brought out new issues?
Yes, just to compound on what Dana has already said, I believe we can all agree, like, mental health right now is probably one of the next pandemics we have to be dealing with. It was already bad enough, but it's kind of brewing in the background, and if not tackled quickly, that's just going to overflow, especially on our youth who are our future. And, some of the things that do definitely impact our mental health as youth, especially from my perspective, from my country, Botswana, I think one of the biggest issues that have now kind of escalated because of COVID is unemployment. And youth unemployment has been really a struggle, especially for some developing countries like Botswana. Already there was like 1/3 of the demographic between 20 and 24 who are unemployed. Now put a COVID-19 pandemic there, these numbers are predicted to skyrocket. Right now, young people have been disproportionately affected around the world, and you have employment of young people falling sharply, according to the ILO, that about 8.7%. By 8.7% compared to the adults, which are about 3.7%. And these numbers, on top of lockdown measures, which have kind of constrained young people from even looking for work. Now you have people who are not employed, not in education or training, which leaves young people worse off for the years to come. And to compound this, you now have also young women who are then further disproportionately affected, because now, it reflects kind of the work environments that they work in. Most women, you find them in the hospitality sector, which are one of the most affected by COVID. So you have that, and then you have the fact that there's closure of schools and care services, which have also affected young mothers. So they can't even get jobs, most types of work, because they have to stay home with the kids. But even if they're able to stay home with the kids, they can't even take up work to work from home. So it puts a lot of people in a predicament. And you find that there's just such devastation in some of the developing countries when it comes to now the youth are entering this new stage of inactivity, in which they have even stopped actively looking for work, and then unfortunately the reality is that the short-term exit for them, we're looking at them going into a long-term exclusion from the labor market. And there's a real concern for young people, because the longer they stay out and they distance themselves from the labor market, the longer, the harder it's going to be to re-enter. And already in Botswana, there was already that difficulty in the beginning to re-enter the labor market. Now put in COVID-19 in there, these situations are just, getting worse and worse and worse. And, we had hoped that things would be better by now. Unfortunately, the resolution is an uneven and fragile recovery. At the moment, you have countries still going back into lockdown. You never know, you can't plan forward. There are significant delays in vaccine rollouts in other countries. And some countries, especially developing countries, are finding it, challenging to maintain that support, like the stimulus support of the economy, due to less means and capacity to do so. And who gets the brunt of it? The youth, because, they're less established in the labor market. So things like those measures of, emergency income support and job retention measures, they kind of tend to leave them out. And when that happens, you find that, that youth unemployment is set to skyrocket as usual. And we are kind of mental health, unemployment, all these other issues are just compounding on us, and we're not sure, where to tend to. So I honestly believe that right now, youth are in a crisis, even though COVID-19 and the health part of it, get the vaccines, get back to normal. We're questioning, what does normal look like for us? Where are we going to look for these jobs? We have stayed out of the job market. Will they understand that it's been a pandemic? So there's gap. Can they account for the gap, in my studies, in my workforce, or in my career? We are kind of faced with these uncertainties as youth that we're trying to grapple with. And I believe, conversations like this need to be held with youth to kind of understand their perspectives and where they're coming from, and hopefully have, intergenerational dialogue to map the way forward.
Thank you so much, Reba. So what we hear essentially from both of you are huge disruption in education, emotional and mental health impacts, youth unemployment, and as you just said, Reba, youth are in crisis. And what does the new normal look like? And if I then go back to what Hava talked about in terms of the mega trends, the 17 sustainable development goals, it honestly sounds kind of overwhelming what we have to address. So let me now ask Mois and Tatiana and Louise to just talk briefly, because you guys are people with award-winning social ventures. What can we do? What can young people do to make a difference in their communities in the world? Because I think the most important thing is, and Hava said this, we have to inspire ourselves and others to take action, right? And not just sit back and say, this is overwhelming, we can't do anything. So what advice do you have? I've also seen some questions in the Q&A and on Facebook kind of around that. What can I do as a young person? So let's start maybe with Mois.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Daniel. I'd like to begin by saying that this is a very challenging sort of question. What can I do to sort of help someone else? And one of the things that's particularly helped me is reflecting on some of my competencies and some of my skills and some of my experiences and using those experiences to perhaps help others. 3 years ago, I was 17 at the time. I participated in the Global Impact Challenge. You know, there were so many incredible ventures. You had people that were 28, 29, 30 years of age, people with masters, undergraduate degrees, PhDs. I said to myself, what, you know, from an educational standpoint, I don't have that sort of experience. I'm not someone who works for the United Nations and can influence policy that way. So I said, you know, looking at some of my experiences, what can I do to help other people? And that's where some of my martial arts experiences came in. At the time, I was competing internationally in the sport of jiu-jitsu, nationally in wrestling and judo. So I had this extensive martial arts background. And I said, what if I use this martial arts background to sort of empower women in developing countries? That's when I identified that within my home country of Pakistan, within my community, there was this big issue of sexual abuse and physical violence. And while I don't necessarily have the capabilities to influence policy, because I'm not perhaps so much educated in that capacity, what if I used my knowledge of martial arts to teach these women self-defense and help to empower them? So I think to answer your question, and Daniel, rather, we really have to look to ourselves and also understand some of our sort of competencies and skills that we can do and use to help others. So I think that's the first thing. And secondly, if I can just add, this entire experience with social entrepreneurship and helping others is challenging. And I think we need to be in the mindset of taking small steps. You know, even helping one person is much more impactful than simply feeling sorry for the millions affected. If you help just members of your community, members of your family, you're already doing something and you're already taking the next steps to help others. I had such an incredible support from Friendship Ambassadors Foundation, access to incredible mentors and seed funding. It was still a very, very challenging experience for me. So, you know, starting with your experiences in social entrepreneurship, please understand it's not going to be perfect. It might not go your way, but that's okay. We all go through challenges and we all go through difficulties. It's about taking small steps and starting small to help others.
Thank you so much. Very practical advice. Focus on your competencies and don't feel overwhelmed by, you know, the huge things you want to achieve. Take a small step at a time. Tatiana, can I turn to you now? What do you think would make a difference, or what can young people do? And maybe also introduce yourself briefly, because we missed you in the very beginning. Tatiana.
Yes. No. Hello. How are you? So, well, I'm Tatiana. I'm from Cartagena, Indias, in Colombia. Currently, I'm living in Spain, and I'm studying my PhD here. I'm studying gender. So, yeah. What I would like to start by saying is that, I won this Impact Challenge in 2019, and back then I felt just like Moise was describing, because I was so nervous that day when we have to go there to New York. I mean, I've never imagined to have this kind of experience. And it was very, very, it has an impact emotionally on me. But it was also a great experience to share with incredible people and to learn from them. So I want to start by saying, in the same line that Moise was describing, that actually I feel like we as a young people, we want to start like creating massive and huge social change with everything we want to do, right? But in real life, social change take years to happen sometimes, right? And this can feel sometimes discouraged for us as young leaders when we try to do something. But as we all have shared in our experience, I think it's very important that you try to start by what you can control and what you can achieve in the micro local level, right? And lastly, like to put everything in your passion, what is in your capacity to do, and meaning that you will give all you have and your best in this, right? So asking about the question that you said at the beginning, what we can do as young leaders in our communities, I think, well, since I've been studying a lot of these kind of issues, especially centered in gender and STEM careers, I think it's very important for now to work around tech and environment, because this can make a good fit. You know, if we manage to develop friendly tech solutions in agriculture, industries, solar energy, and so on, we can finally end up using fossil fuels, and our countries may start to be more competitive. Also, another point that is very important to me because of my field study in my PhD is that I consider gender mainstreaming has to be important, and really it should matter at all levels now, because that is important to evolve, yeah, to our society to evolve. And we need to do this is from a point without violence, instead with strong messages of unity and diversity and inclusion. Let's not forget that gender is also about embrace diversity, and as for us humans, we need to accept others, and the accept the difference in others is also a way of uniqueness and belonging. So this is very important what I'm in my field, and this is what I think we should be thinking of as young leaders. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Really important message around embracing diversity and difference. I think this is, as we see with so much polarization around the world, a huge challenge for everyone. It's sometimes a challenge for us at a personal level or individual level, but I think this is something that is so essential if we want to move forward and finding common solution to our biggest challenges, is that we actually work in unity, hand in hand, and are inclusive of all the different perspectives around the world. So thank you for raising that. Let me turn to Louise. What about you, and how do you see this in your community?
Thanks so much, Daniel, for that question. For me, I think the way that change making has kind of occurred in our community. Well, I actually have a couple of tips, because I began my social venture in 2017 when I was 18 years old. And it was challenging because I was this young person who just got thrown into this crazy social enterprise world of solving different problems from around the globe. And the very first time I pitched my social venture was at the youth assembly. So my tips for a lot of young people, especially people who start within my community and now in the pandemic, is number one, you have to start local. Living in your communities and having these solutions and interventions really rely on your personal lived experiences and the issues that you see within your neighborhood, within your town or locality. And that's really important now, because in addressing a problem, you need to have a more holistic, nuanced understanding of the issues. And sometimes those issues aren't going to be the same as they're going to be in the US, for example, versus in the Philippines. So it really depends on your geographical zone, and having that sense of understanding of where you are and what solutions can happen. You need to start right where you are in your locality. And second of all, I think it's cultivating a culture that holds sustainability as a basic standard. Now, I think in the Philippines, I work in an agricultural field, and it's really important for us to actually destigmatize green jobs and industries like farming and agriculture, and instead take them into the fold of sustainability and use that as a means of green recovery. Teach youth about reforestation, teach them about the carbon cycle and the value of our soils. I think it's really important now that sustainability becomes normalized. It's not just something that's added on as a boost or as a bonus, but it's something that is expected out of everyone. And that's also important as young people, as we hold businesses and governments accountable, that we take this as an expectation. It's not something that's just a bonus or a plus for us. It's something that we should already have intrinsically as a normalized standard, because if not, then our future will be quite bleak. But because of the way that the world is evolving now, the future will have to be sustainable or it won't happen at all because of soil degradation and our triple planetary crisis, which was mentioned by our speakers. And I know that everyone had covered a lot, but third of all, because of our interconnectedness, I think it's important that we take the time to be informed. So how do we become informed and create these informed opinions? By learning, by attending seminars like these and attending the youth assembly and building these networks and learning about different situations of people around the world and opening our perspectives. You're never entitled to your own opinion. You're only entitled to your informed opinion. And I think that's really vital as young people because we're so interconnected and it's really easy to disseminate information, whether that's true or false. So we hold a very big responsibility in sharing that information and actually being able to educate others within our community and to build solutions in the long term that have better impact across the world and regenerate. So I think that's kind of the points that I have for young people watching. And I think right now, as we're young people watching this, it's important that we also recognize our responsibility as stewards of the future, because there's never a time in history where a crisis came and nothing changed. Crises are always breeding grounds for transformation, for transitions, and for change. And as the young people who are going to inherit that future that we're transitioning into, we hold the largest stake in how this transformation should go, and we should be represented in the discussions in how we shape our steps moving forward. So that's all from me. Back to you, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Louise, and really well said, especially in light of so much disinformation, the incredibly important role of being informed, of starting local, and of incorporating sustainability in everything that you do. So I think we have some good building blocks for those who want to start with their initiatives and, you know, take confidence in what is your competence, and then take a small step, embrace diversity and difference, start local, and be informed. So I think that's some really good advice. And we're almost out of time, and I want to just turn for 30 seconds each to Hava and Regina, Regina, just reactions from you about what you heard and how we move forward. And then I'll have some concluding remarks about the Youth Assembly. So Hava, from you, just briefly.
Thanks so much. I think it's been refreshing to hear these ideas, and a lot of the same things sort of rolled around in my head. So it's great to be in a platform of like-minded people who I know are taking action in their local and global platforms. You know, as everybody was talking, two things came to my head, and I haven't had my coffee this morning. Right now, I'm only remembering one of them. But the one thing that was in my head that I can remember is that, you know, I'm a very passionate person. I love to talk about inspiring people. I'm inspired about people and, you know, talking a lot about what the UN is doing. But then I think to myself, I always tell the young people I work with, talk is cheap. And that if we're going to say these things, that, you know, we really need to be true to what we're saying. You know, I want to be speaking truth, but also I want to, you know, I don't know, is it take truth action? Because sometimes you find that we get this fantastic platform and I'm inspired. But then when it's not just enough to be inspired, to inspire people to be so psyched, but to actually live by what we're saying. And that's just what kept going through my head, because there's such great ideas. And I just hope that we live by what we're saying, what we're preaching. If I have a sip of coffee and I remember the other thing, I'll come back at you in the chat. Thank you so much for having me. Over.
I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities, but you're exactly right. Talk is cheap. We got to take action. And as we've seen from our speakers, everybody, all of you have been taking action and have done incredible work. And all of us can start small too. Regina, last word to you. Okay, so I'll take the last word then. And this is an exciting announcement. And I'll just ask Yumna to briefly share the screen again. So this is just a couple things about the upcoming Youth Assembly and one really exciting change. And this goes to kind of global citizens wanting to take action. So it's loading. So first of all, For all of you who want to get engaged with the youth assembly in your country, one of the most important roles is being an ambassador of the youth assembly. That means rallying young people in your community to participate, to put together delegations. And that is going live in November. And so you will be able to apply as an ambassador and be selected, and then can kind of really take action in your community to advance the goals of the youth assembly. There will also be a call for program proposals, and of course the program applications will also go live. The registration for the youth assembly opens in February, and then of course the youth assembly will take place in August in New York City. But the exciting announcement that I want to share, if you go to the next slide, Yumna, is that in the past we've had this impact challenge and we were able to give awards. But this year we will be able to give a special award, and this is introducing the AFS Prize for Young Global Citizens. And it's a $10,000 prize for a young entrepreneur who is has a social venture that would be something that advances the Sustainable Development Goals, but also, and this is why we're at AFS especially so focused on global citizens, but that also is around initiatives where young people are embracing difference and working hand in hand with others. So be prepared to pitch your proposals. It's a $10,000 prize. There will be 2 runners-up of $2,500 each. So this is us putting more commitment behind incentivizing young people to get started. With that, we are out of time. I want to thank all the incredible panelists. I think you have done so much to inspire us, and that's how you started, Hava, is kind of how do we inspire ourselves and others to be motivated to take action. And all of you have done this, the speakers. Thank you so much to all of those who tuned in live on Facebook, and to those of you who were here on the Zoom call with us. It's really great to see so many people from around the world being eager to take action in your community and in the world. That gives me hope for the future. With that, thank you all very much for participating. We will share a recording of this call as well as all the resources that were mentioned. And we all look forward to seeing you, hopefully live in person in August in New York City. Thank you all very much. Good night, good morning, have your cup of coffee or go to bed depending on where you are. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.